Nice to meet you. First, I would like just to thank you for the participation in the European Cloud Computing Community Interview Series, and with intention to help the European Commission within its pursuit of the European fit within the digital age. The idea of these interviews is to talk about issues that are impacting cloud computing, regarding business modeling, skills that we think that are needed in Europe just to reach the same level as US or Asia. Also a little bit about data sovereignty and data governance and energy efficiency. So for a start, could you please tell us a little bit about the Elastisys story, which is its mission and vision?
Yes, so we're a Swedish company that is a spin-off from university research in basically how to optimize cloud computing using intelligent methods. And we've been in operation for almost 10 years. So our focus is really to try to provide the sort of benefits that you would achieve with running on large international clouds from outside of Europe, but on smaller European cloud providers. So we're trying to recreate some of the very rich and capable services that men are used to from non-European clouds, but running on smaller European providers. And that we do based on Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem. So many of our customers are very concerned about, on one side, they want data privacy and security, in particular GDPR compliance. On the other side, they want a modern cloud platform that enables them to build applications in a good way and be innovative. And that we're trying to reach.
Very interesting. As I see that your company is also, well, you have business in Europe and North America, I guess. Regarding how to make money, what is the business model? Because this is one of the concerns. I mean, you may have cloud computing, but especially what we know how the Americans, how they make money with cloud computing. But from the European perspective, how is the best business model, or how do you think it will be a good business model in Europe?
Well, I mean, that depends. I see a large opportunity to basically operate a public cloud offering infrastructure services in Europe. And already today, we see many smaller European players really accelerating their effort, opening new data centers and so on. So, I mean, that's one viable business, and there's a big increase for European cloud infrastructure services. Then on the other hand, which is the path we have taken, is that then to provide managed services on top of such clouds, because a regular smaller European cloud player will not have the full catalog of services that some big American clouds have. So things such as managed container platforms, managed databases, and other types of services that cloud users would need, and in particular developers who want to build applications for the cloud. So that's one part. And then of course there's also all the rich need for skills overall, so providing some sort of professional services dedicated to onboarding new and old applications onto these European cloud platforms that are quite diverging both in technology and maturity. So it's more challenging working on European clouds. So I think many software developers and architects, they call themselves cloud architects, and only been working with big American clouds. They're up for somewhat of an awakening when moving to some European infrastructures. And I'm not saying that they're bad, but some are a bit rough in the edges and some are a bit immature, and there's a big diversity in technology. So you have to do more of the heavy lifting yourself when you're working on European clouds. In particular, if you're looking for aspects such as you want geo redundancy to deploy across different clouds and so on. So I mean that's very challenging to do.
Yeah, because it looks like whenever you have the skills, then you move to work for an American company instead of the European company. So probably from your perspective, if you want to have skills in your company, if you want to hire people in your company, do you find it difficult to find people there in Europe with the appropriate skills?
Yes and no. I think that, I mean, there's there's good people, and there's a lot of good people in Europe also with the appropriate skills. But of course, these are highly in demand, and there's high competition for them. I think that many European companies, either if they're like us, are small, or if they're working in a business that is not well known in the software industry, it can be a hard time to recruit people with the right skills.
And that's probably because, I mean, that's probably because when you go to the university, to the academia, they do not have these courses or the appropriate adaptation of their university courses so that the people get the knowledge. Or it's maybe you need that someone has to, has to have the feeling that has to have some extra training, I don't know, masters or any other degree.
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated, and I'm very biased here as I have a part-time job actually teaching cloud computing and doing research on that.
Yeah, I guess.
So that, I mean, yes, I think that many European universities have been including very relevant topics in this area into education on sort of for various types of engineering, software engineering, and so on. And that makes sense, but of course, it's a rather slow cycle in academia, and what is the relevant skills that moves much more faster in industry. But what we see, at least in our company, we've been hiring many fresh graduates from the university, and they not necessarily have exactly the right technical skills and so on, but they have a very good foundation for quickly picking up these skills required. So I would say the overall problem is not necessarily the lack of skill in individual engineers and developers, but it's just a shortage. So for every graduate from the university, there's like two open jobs to fill. That's more like the problem.
Mm-hmm. So that's difficult issue to tackle with, because I was trying just to think about what we should invite the European Commission just to promote, or how do what they could do. I mean, just to change the situation a little bit. But I mean, I think that there is not an easy answer for that.
I guess this goes way back to we need to get more people, more young people, in particular girls, interested in jobs in the IT industry. I think that's a major challenge. This goes
sorry,
way down the education system.
I need just to. I think Christian is waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to admit Christian. Okay, here. Yeah, Christian. Yeah, Christian is there. Sorry, Christian. We have already been just talking a little bit with Johan, a little bit about what is the business model and the skills needed. Well, I don't know, Johan, do you would like just Christian just to say something more about it, or we can move to the next topic?
Please move on.
Yeah, I think so. So Christian, well, first, thank you for accepting the invitation. We will now just move into what we call data governance. There is some kind of data governance and data sovereignty. You know, in Europe, there is pretty much concerns about the data protection. I wouldn't say that's well, it always seems like Europe is more concerned about privacy than maybe other regions in the world. Have you feel what is your feeling when you have your products in the US and your products in Europe? Do you feel that the pressure for data protection is higher in Europe, and how do you manage with that?
So first of all, I wanted just to highlight that the US, for example, is not foreign to the concept of privacy and data protection. And instead, if you're looking at their healthcare regulations, there, for example, they have been issued, I think, in '96. And to me, they're pretty much GDPR, but only when it comes to patient records. And generally, that's an industry that is, let's say, off-putting for developers. It's a lot easier to build a business model around harvesting data from users and then profiling them and serving them nice ads, rather than a business model where you need to carefully think about the purpose of collecting data, and you need to clearly specify why and things like that. So I would say that if you're dealing with healthcare data, the mindset and the mentality around the two continents is pretty much shared. Then when it comes to any kind of personal data, such as your email address, your phone number and whatnot, there I do notice that there is a huge gap, let's say, across the continents. But I also noticed that that gap is slowly bridging. So California, for example, issued a I think the state of Virginia and California issued GDPR-like laws. And so one could easily foresee that maybe, although at the federal level, nothing seems to be moving, but maybe all of the 52 states will be issuing some GDPR-like laws in the near future. And there is some precedent around it. Breach notification laws, for example, which is encoded in GDPR, already exist in all of the 52 states of the United States. And it was quite interesting to see that, well, the states solved this at the state level instead of waiting for the federal government to fix this for them. So yes, there is a gap, but I also see that initiatives are being taken to bridge it.
So yeah, probably the difference between Europe and the United States is that in Europe is I would say the government is the one that is just setting up the rules, and then the rest of Europe, you have to follow them. In the States, it seems a little bit like the companies that they are putting pressure on protecting the data, and then the government can come afterwards, something like that, or not. Completely mistaken.
I don't quite see it like that, because people are making a huge distinction between security and privacy, where security is defined very loosely as protecting data from attackers, whereas privacy is protecting data from sales. And of course, when it's about protecting data from attackers, then everybody's on the same page and everybody's on board. And it's a bit like you say, like companies see this as a competitive advantage. They anyway have to do this in order to keep their brand alive and for consumer trust. So they have strong incentives to legislate this mandate, so everybody sticks to the same to have a level playground. When it comes to privacy, though, like I said, protecting data from sales, there is still a bit of an uneven territory across the continents, across the Atlantic, but there I see that the gap is also bridging very quickly. And given the current business model of, let's call it, big Silicon Valley companies, I think that they're very uninteresting and will try to play every single card in the book to stop the US government, either at federal level or state level, to enact privacy related laws.
That's interesting. What about when the customers would like to have control on his data, and also just to have the capacity to control the access of the data, so that one, let's say, public agency can use the data for certain reasons, or maybe just have some kind of as an anonymous profile, when they can only just get certain amount of my information. So let's say that now the user is the one that controls what you can do with his data. Do you think this is the way forward? It will be too complicated, or what's your feeling about it?
So do you mean gathering personal data for statistical purposes for societal good?
Well, that's I, as a customer, we have to have all the power, I would say, to tell to each company or public agency what they can do with my data, for the time that I want them to do. And even if they just want to I wouldn't say sell, but to share the data with another company, I should be informed, and I can just revoke the permission if I like, on this kind of thing. So it's and I mean, because there is a lot of work just on the European Commission just on that, and so that you can even have a wallet there where you can just have all your data with you, and you are the one that's are allowing the access to the data for the purpose that you would like them to use it, no more than that. I mean, since I think it's getting just more complicated. I mean, you're giving the customer the power, while maybe it makes it more complicated for the cloud computing providers to manage this data.
Yes, so I do agree with you that it's I was listening recently to a presentation from a mining company, and he was very, you could see that he was trained by marketing, right? On one hand, he says like, oh, it's so difficult to ensure the safety of people in mining. But then he very quickly turned around like, but we want our friends to come safely home, and we want not to be subject, not to ruin the environment and things like that. So I think it's a little bit like that also with data protection, that you still have the industry that is a bit split. Of course, it's very easy to make excuses and say like, oh, this is so much red tape and so much bureaucracy coming in from Berlin, and we totally don't want this. But I think that once you explain consumers what this entails for them, they really want this. I mean, there is a bit of maybe a gap of understanding of what is data protection, what are data rights, because it's a very abstract notion, right? That only existed for like 3 years. And even us specialists are a little bit struggling with drawing the lines on this newly charted map. So of course, informing the consumer with this is even more bothersome. And like I said, so I think that consumers will want this long term. I think the genie is out of the bottle and it's here to stay, and it's only going to get better for consumers. But then of course this will put a lot of pressure on the companies to live up to this. But to me, this is pretty much like with any new regulation, right? So for example, when I remember I'm still as young as to have witnessed when the regulation came about where you are allowed to return a product within 40 days of an online shopping for no reason at all, just because you change your mind in the meantime. And of course, in the beginning, you could argue like, oh, this makes things so much more complicated to conduct business online. But the rule was there to stick. Consumers really wanted it. Companies eventually adjusted it, and they could, they realized that, okay, well, if the consumer can't change their mind within 14 days, then we also need to adjust our business model and increase the quality of our offers accordingly. And I think that's how it will happen also with data protection. The business model will just need to adjust in order to add more value to their consumers and not just predate on top of their personal data.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, let's move because we're a bit short of time. The next topic is about the green ICT or energy efficiency. What is your feeling? I mean, that do you think this is going to be a very fundamental issue within the cloud computing community?
It's a very controversial topic because there is a lot of greenwashing, I feel, happening. So it's kind of, I mean, if we take it very realistically, I think data centers are currently hovering around 2 or 3% of global electricity demand, not global energy demand, but just global electricity demand. So even if that whole sector overnight turned green, we would still be facing with 98% of the electricity problem and even more percent of the energy problem, right? So it's nice that they lead by example, but strictly speaking, it's not going to affect the kind of change that we as a species really need right now. So to me, at least, it feels a little bit of a greenwashing, but that's not really a problem because, well, companies that can do it, then they will just do it and they will lead by example. But I notice also a little bit of a dichotomy in the industry that either you have cloud computing providers that, you know, they want green energy and they do carbon offsetting and things like that. And then you have Bitcoin mining. And it almost feels to me like, you know, all the improvements that are being done here are hugely offset by whatever is happening here. So I wish more was I could totally see more potential for things being done in with this respect.
And from I mean, I'm based up in northern Sweden, where it's the climate is very good for data centers. It's not getting too warm, lots of free cooling, and the purpose of cheap electricity from major hydropowers. I mean, there's been a lot of data centers establishment in this part of Europe, and I mean that's nice. So if you're going to build a data center, you better build it somewhere where you get cheap and green electricity. That makes sense, and at a reasonable distance from its user due to latency issues. But then on the other hand, would Europe and a sort of northern Europe more become just a sort of resource or a sort of commodity for data centers? Yeah. So everyone will establish data centers here due to access.
I agree. I've seen many initiatives of just bringing all the data centers to Sweden or Northern Europe because of the climate. So,
I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily generate that much business, that much employment, or that much benefit for a particular country, because it's basically they're using a lot of electricity, but not so much else. If you compare to establishing other types of industries that will create a lot of jobs and so on. So it's a sort of double-edged sword.
I agree. I forgot to ask you something about the Cloud Federation, because what I heard is that in order to compete with the big stakeholders, Europe will more be into the federating different cloud providers into a big one. What is your feeling about that? Do you think that you will really compete with the big ones?
Johan, I'm really looking forward to hear your opinion on this.
Commonly, I've been researching technical means to achieve cloud federation for more than a decade, and although technically possible, I see many implications and many business reasons why this would simply not be such a great idea, and it will complicate operations a lot. So I more see some sort of multi-cloud strategy being more feasible. So as a consumer of cloud services, I will get some cloud services from one provider and some other cloud services from other provider. Then I see no need to actually connect these in a tight federation, neither from the consumer side or across the providers. I mean, this is not a telephone network where we want to seamlessly roam our cell phone across the providers. So these are different services operated by different providers, possibly also with very different characteristics, payment schemes, technical solutions, and so on. So there's commonly very little need to actually federate these together, but rather see them as a large catalog of services that can be consumed independently, and whenever it makes sense, some sort of connected solution could be created on top of these services, but don't federate these for the sake of connecting them. That's my take on it.
Yeah, very interesting opinion. I mean, not from the technical side, but from the business side, I would say. Well, we have only a couple of minutes, so I would like just to move to the next topic. I wish I have more time because we are having a lot of very interesting feedback for you. We have 3 more topics. One of them is your opinion about open source. So do you think that open source is as important as proprietary software? What is your vision about open source?
I very much am influenced, and I also noticed there was a very famous essay by Eric S. I forgot his name, one of the leaders of open source, and I noticed that that's kind of the vision that stuck. So think about your business: what is really differentiating and making unique, and what is non-differentiating. And I mean, when you're going, for example, to your bank, then of course you would care about how easy the user interface to use, how easy it is to get a loan, what loan rate they're going to get. You don't really care about are they using Linux or Windows or Node.js versus Go in their backend. So all of those topics, they should be made as simple, as commoditized, and as boring as possible. And that's where open source, in my opinion, is really going to strive. On the other hand, I don't think that Google will ever, open source their search engine, because that's where they truly differentiate. That's where they make a difference. And same thing, AWS will also not open source the machine that runs their cloud, because that's what they got really well, and that's what we can really innovate and be different than everybody else. So I think that open source has its place, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not, and of course the future is not like open source everywhere or don't open source anywhere, but it will be a very careful combination of using open source where it makes sense and not using open source where, again, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like always, there is nothing which is very exclusive. They can be both together. Yeah, I agree. And regarding cybersecurity, well, here I have the questions. They say, what are the characteristics of trustworthy software infrastructures for your organizations? Reliability, stable, frequency updated, secure. Well, I think it's a difficult question to answer, I guess, but probably maybe just to get what is your point about cybersecurity in general? I mean, it will be good enough for the interview.
So first of all, I think it's very interesting that cybersecurity used to be the kind of stuff that you're doing in your basement as an engineer, whereas GDPR has very much turned the table, and now it's something that makes the CEO and the board of a company sweat. And I think the data protection authority is very clear about it. I mean, the fines that have been administered lately, they make it very clear that, okay, this is not just some aspirational, optional item that politicians in the EU Parliament came up with. This is really law, and you need to stick to it, and you need to make sure that you're staffing properly your organization for security. I would also like to highlight that it's not only about technical measures, but also organizational measures. So before you activate two-factor authentication and force people to rotate passwords every month, maybe you should just tell them not to share it to begin with, and inform them why it's important not to share it with. And otherwise, yeah, it's pretty much what's your risk profile. Some organizations will, if for example you're dealing with very little personal data, then probably you're not such a huge and interesting target, so then you can maintain a bit of a leaner risk profile. However, if for example you are potentially targeted by state actors, then of course you need an arsenal of security specialists just to detect advanced persistent threats and to counteract them. So not sure if I answered your question, but definitely share some thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I was just only wanted to know if you have in your company, you have some kind of a cybersecurity department just to tackle with these kind of issues, or that's something that does not bother your company very much.
We're right now making it a bit more throughout the company. So it's not like, oh, there is security and there is marketing and there is sales. No. Like, this is a company-wide effort. You cannot have part of the organization which is super secure and treating patient data with respect, and the other one that is just throwing in documents and sharing that with whoever. So right now it's a bit of a company-wide effort. Everybody is responsible for bringing up issues that they feel, okay, here I feel that there is a little bit of a gap and we could improve that. And afterwards, you just have a process to regularly invest into making these processes better, and as we grow, to improve also our security posture accordingly.
Okay, great. Well, on the final, Johan?
No, I'm just saying that, I mean, we're handling a lot of sensitive personal data for various companies with a lot of sensitive data in our managed services. So, I mean, security is a core part of our business.
Yeah. Well, and the final question, so that we end more or less on time, is about software engineering for the cloud. Well, I have here a couple of questions. More or less is that if you develop or sell software within your company, and if so, how is done? I mean, if you are doing an in-house team, outsourcing to Europe, or outsourcing into Europe or out of Europe, do you have something like regarding software engineering?
Yeah, I can answer that. So yes, we are doing a lot of software engineering. We're doing everything in-house with no external contractors, and so I think we've been very lucky in recruiting a great team of engineers. So we're doing that with
okay, and
both as professional services to onboard various customers to cloud services, and also for in our own Kubernetes distribution that we're also operating. So we're doing a lot of engineering in this part.
Mm-hmm. And what is the demand of this kind of services? Is it very huge? I mean, you see there is increasing demand of this kind of services, or it just remains stable?
No, there's an increasing migration to the cloud overall, and also attention to these cloud native concepts with containers and so on. So there's a big increase both for.
So you feel that the companies
and for our products. Yeah.
And this migration is just only for the big companies, or also the small and medium enterprises or entrepreneurs? They are also just coming into this world.
So we're working with everything from small startups that can fit into the same office to big publicly listed companies with tens of thousands of employees. They have different challenges, of course, but they're.
Oh, I mean, because for us, well, I mean, for Europeans, not only for us, it's very interesting that the startups, they just get engaged with cloud computing from the very beginning. I mean, it's also the big companies we know that they are just moving into, well, they are migrating into cloud, but sometimes SMEs or startups, they probably they need to have an incentive just to move into this kind of world. Okay, I think we are in time. So I don't know if you would like to say some final words, or for me, and I think it's been a very interesting interview. I would like just to thank you for your very interesting contributions there. And or anything that you would like to say just to end the interview, or so fine? Christian, Johan?
No, I just thought thank you very much for inviting us for this interview, and I'm really looking forward to see what direction your project is going to take. I think it addresses a very timely topic now with data sovereignty and bringing workloads back home.
Yeah, well, we will only advise the European Commission. I hope that they will just take note of all the the feelings from the community, and they work to strengthen the points there. And let's hope that Europe and at the end gets more strong in cloud computing.
Yeah, we hope so too.
We're definitely doing that. So thanks a lot for the interview.
Thank you very much to Christian, Johan. Take care and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.